correctly. It's just supposed to be for the good of the church and for the good of all. It's supposed to be profitable, and the way you're using it is not profitable. It's very inconvenient and terrible for the church. It's actually causing division and problems. And so let's keep reading in verse 8. He says, "For to one is given the word of wisdom through the Spirit, another the word of knowledge through the same Spirit, to another faith by the same Spirit, to another gifts of healing by the same Spirit, to another the working of miracles, to another prophecy, to another discerning of spirits, to another different kind of tongues, and another interpretation of tongues. But one and the same Spirit works all these things, distributing to them individually as He wills." So we can see what Paul is doing. He's informing these brethren that there are different miraculous gifts of the Holy Spirit. And not everyone had the same gift. But that did not mean that it was from different sources. It was the same God working through all of them towards the same goal. And so he needs them to understand that. We can see that clearly too. If you look at verse 8 through 10, it's amazing because all of these things build off of one another. Okay? You can see God in His perfection of how He made the church and how He made these miraculous gifts work together. You need miraculous wisdom, knowledge, and faith to be able to properly lead others to Jesus. You need the perfect message of God to be able to hand to other people, to preach to them so that they can obey the gospel. The gift of healing and other miraculous gifts were able to prove that message by those speaking it. Those who prophesied were able to speak with clarity and enlightenment of future events or things that needed to further instruct the church. Those who could discern spirits were able to tell whether or not those who were prophesying were from God. Those who spoke in tongues were also able to be discerned by those people. Those speaking in tongues provided another proof of God's working hand that was very powerful. In Acts chapter 2 we see that. We also see that in 1 Corinthians. He talks about it in just a few other chapters, that people walking in and seeing those things taking place made them say, God is here. This is amazing. The power is working here. But those who could interpret what was said by those speaking in tongue made sure that what was witnessed was profitable for the rest of the congregation. If you took any of these things, if you were able to just speak in tongues, which is literally just speaking in a language which you never learned, God just granted you to know it, but you were speaking that, but no one was interpreting it. Well, how beneficial was that really? How profitable really is that? If you could interpret a message, but no one else was speaking in tongue, how profitable is that? If you could discern spirits, but there was only one person talking, and you already know that that person is from God, how really profitable is that? The whole point is you could go on and say, how is this going to be used for God? He had a plan for it to be used, and it is to be used in a very logical and proper way. And if all of these people started to use their miraculous gifts not for God's purpose, then you can see what a mess it would become. You can see how nothing profitable would actually come from it. All these miraculous things, though different, were all working in the same direction toward the same goal, which was to glorify God. Different, yet the same. It makes sense then that Paul in verse 12 begins to give an analogy comparing the church to the human body. In verse 12,